outside of Christian McCaffrey, running backs in fantasy football have been super hit and miss, and I mean mostly miss, at the front of fantasy football drafts the last couple of years. So much so to the point that we've like completely pivoted to drafting wide receivers in the first like 2-3 rounds almost completely. So let's talk about that, and let's also talk about why this year could be the year that we kind of pivot back to running backs being elite, because this is honestly the best I felt about running backs at the beginning of fantasy drafts in years, and I'm going to tell you why. Because from 2017 to 2021, there were 15 running backs. This is over a 5-year period here, 2017 through 2021. 15 running backs to average over 20 points per game in half PPR leagues, an average of 3 running backs per year. 2022, 0 running backs over 20 points per game. 2023, CMC, and Kyron Williams. Kyron Williams only playing half a season. Really, you've only seen Christian McCaffrey since 2021. He's really the only guy that's averaged 20 points per game over a whole season, right? So you see a very, very stark difference. And what basically happened there was you saw the NFL start shifting from you have all these workhorse backs to now everything's going to be committee-based and everything is going to be you have this role and you have this role. And so you start splitting up people's productions. You had a lot of people like 17 to 19 points per game in those ranges, but not a lot of people were like elite, and I'm saying 20-plus point per game producers, and that's a lot of points. But again, when I'm talking about elite running backs, this used to be a lot more common. So what in the world happened? Can we get back to this? Let's talk about it. So in 2022, 7 of 12 of the first-round picks in fantasy football were running backs. 7 of 12. In the second round, 7 of 12 were running backs as well. So you're talking about 14 of the first 24 picks in fantasy football drafts in 2022, just 2 years ago. 14 of the first 24 were running backs. Oh, how things have changed. Let's look at how those running backs finished in 2022. In 2022, you had Jonathan Taylor as the running back 1. He was the first overall pick, came off 2021, was balling. Running back 33. Christian McCaffrey, running back 2. And he finishes as running back 2. There you go. He did well. Derrick Henry, third running back off the board, finishes the running back 4. Check. Eckler was the running back 1. Dalvin was the running back 8. So you actually had 4 guys up here that really did well. After this, it's a crapshoot. Najee was obviously running back 6, RB 14. Mixon, RB 13. DeAndre Swift, running back 21. Aaron Jones, running back 9. Another decent one. Kamara, running back 16. Saquon was the running back 6. Nick Chubb was the running back 5. They were both being drafted significantly lower. Fournette was the running back 17, and Javonte Williams was being drafted as the running back 14. He finished as the running back 79. So of those 14 running backs...
ACL.
Yeah. Which I almost just put injured. Of those 14 running backs, though, only 4 of those running backs in 2022 met or exceeded their ADP in terms of production. Okay, so that means if they were drafted at the running back 4, finishes the running back 4 or higher. Yeah. 4 of them out of 14 that were drafted in the first 24 picks. Basically saying everybody who drafted running backs in the first 2 rounds, odds are one of those running backs screwed them. Which, if you do the math, you have 14 running backs being drafted in the first 2 rounds. You have a handful of teams that are going double running back up front, which is almost unheard of now. So then we go to 2023. 2023, obviously last year being interesting because in the first 2 rounds, 8 of the first 24 picks were running backs. So you essentially cut in half how many running backs were being selected in the first 2 rounds of fantasy drafts. Cut completely in half after that year.
Yeah.
We reacted way the other way. And so now it's time to figure out, was this the right move? Because we only have 1 year sample size. It's a huge shift to wide receiver. And let's look at what those 8 running backs did. I'll let you kind of read what these guys did.
Yeah, CMC ended up being the running back 1, which honestly, crazily enough, it ended up being one of the biggest wins, too, because CMC is the RB1 overall when people knew that he had that upside, was actually going as like the 3rd option off the board because of Chase and Jefferson going ahead of him.
Yes.
Eckler ended up being the RB26. Oops. Bijan, running back 9. Everyone expected him to come out and score 20-plus points per game as a rookie in an Arthur Smith offense. He ended up being the running back 9. Oh, that sucks. That's terrible. At price, it did. Saquon Barkley, running back 12. He's on the Giants. Chubb. Honestly, injured. Chubb could have been... He's probably the biggest what if in 2023.
He's a top 5
I was lower on him. You were high on him. But in that landscape last year, I flipped at the end. I was like, dude, he would have been a top 3 running back.
It was atrocious last year.
It was bad. Tony Pollard, come on, guys. Running back 14, never had a bell cow workload in his life, was being drafted as a top 5 running back. Did not work out. Derrick Henry, running back 8. Still being drafted high. You can maybe say he worked out, but still at price, it wasn't anything league winning. And then Josh Jacobs, another big red flag guy who had a contract dispute going into the season with a poor situation and honestly just not sustainable production compared to what he did in 2022. So looking back at it, 2 of those running backs met or exceeded their ADP.
So you're talking about
So it looks like the fantasy community last year was right if they were not investing in running back in the first 2 rounds.
They were. And when you look at all the running backs that were being drafted last year in fantasy drafts, almost every single one of them had a red flag. That's what was like last year. You're drafting running backs, you're like, ugh, it felt really gross. Let's look at it. CMC, he had no red flags. He was on one of the best offenses in the NFL, had just gotten traded there the season before. He was Christian McCaffrey. He had no red flags. If you drafted him up front, you won compared to when you drafted Jefferson or Chase. Jefferson being injured, Chase being, Burrow being injured, and Chase also just not performing. But Austin Eckler, huge red flag. Age, it was a big red flag, but mostly coaching change in scheme. Like, there were a lot of people in the fantasy community that were saying that Austin Eckler was a bad pick for that reason, and they were right. We were wrong on that. We thought Austin Eckler was a good pick.
That one took me by surprise big time because Kellen Moore, when you looked at what historically Kellen Moore did in Dallas's offense, is he ran the ball more than McCarthy really ever wanted to.
Yeah.
And, or at least schematically, not the way that McCarthy wanted to. So I was like, okay, he's just going to run it just like he did in Dallas with Eckler and whoever else is there.
No, nope. An injury did contribute to that as well. But Bijan Robinson's huge red flag. Well, he was a rookie, even though he was one of the best rookie prospects running back we've ever seen. The coaching in the scheme in Atlanta should have been a ginormous red flag, and not necessarily like the amount of times they run the ball, because that was good. The problem was we should have known better that Arthur Smith was not going to utilize him correctly. And Arthur Smith didn't. Arthur Smith, as good of an offensive coach as he is, he absolutely fumbled the bag with Bijan. I mean, he
especially with the talent that he showcased his rookie season. It was unbelievable, some of the stuff Bijan was doing.
I think you're going to find out this year just how bad Arthur Smith was at utilizing Bijan. And so that was a huge red flag. So Bijan was a rookie in a scheme where you're like, yeah, the coach is not great. Okay, let's go to Saquon. The red flag there, obviously the Giants, okay?
But hindsight's always 2020. What was the popular opinion of the Giants going into 2023?
Well, they had just won a playoff game.
They just won a playoff game. They were on the rise, and Daniel Jones had just gotten a huge contract where he was supposed to be the guy. Darren Waller was coming in to provide passing opportunity, which was supposed to open the field up for Saquon Barkley.
True.
Just missed on that.
So there was actually, you're right. It wasn't an obvious red flag. It probably should have been something that we considered, but we definitely didn't consider it. But he was still the running back 12. So Nick Chubb, obviously the running back, the red flag there being he was getting older. At some point, we knew he was probably going to hit an age cliff or be injured. And so it's like you can't really predict that.
Injury.
Tony Pollard, the red flag was
this was the biggest red flag,
the workload
by far,
and coming off of a leg injury the year before,
which was massively underplayed.
Yeah. Derrick Henry, the only really thing with him was that he was old. And then Josh Jacobs, the big red flag for that one was that analytically, when you looked at players coming off of a year where they led the NFL in touches as running backs, the analytics of the year after that were horrible. And
I'll be honest, we totally ignored it. We were aware of it and we ignored it.
And
because his price, he was being discounted with the preseason contract issues because he had that contract dispute and everything. And we were like, it doesn't matter his price.
So I do want to account for the red flags with age here in Henry and Chubb because they are guys that when you're looking at this year's running back class, they're significantly older than all the guys this year. And so you don't have even that concern at all. Even if it wasn't a red flag, it was something that was in the back of your mind. And so my point now in this video kind of focuses to this year. This year, I feel good about this. I feel good about running backs this year. I actually am... I'm leaning.
It's been a very weird transition time from like the old generation of running backs to the new over the last couple of years, and then.
But what if we've gotten there?
I think this could be the year.
All right, talk about some of the situations.
I mean, when you're looking at some of the guys that were hyper productive last year that were going at a discount, you're talking about Breece Hall being probably the poster child for that, and it was merited somewhat because of the ACL. But what did we know about Breece Hall, the talent in the situation? You don't play fantasy football for the beginning of the season. You play for the end. And once Breece Hall's carries got ramped up, we knew that his opportunity and that his workload was going to get better and better and his production was going to follow through. And it did. And he ended up being the running back 2 overall coming off of an ACL. So in theory, he had a red flag, but again, he was being discounted for that red flag, unlike all these other guys.
Correct.
And he's younger. Jahmyr Gibbs, a rookie running back. Red flag, rookie running back. Red flag, David Montgomery. Going in the 4th or 5th rounds, he was compared to Bijan Robinson. People that passed up on Bijan took shots on Gibbs because of the value and the price in that range. It worked out for them. Rashad White. What was the red flag? He had never had a bell cow workload in the past because he was playing alongside Leonard Fournette. But what did we know? We knew that his bread and butter was
The receiving game.
the receiving game, and that he was going to get volume on top of that as well. Whether he was or wasn't efficient didn't really matter to us because no one else was behind him.
Right.
So what did he do? He ended up winning you your league.
Right. And
Travis Etienne was another guy as well who was discounted because of the Tank Bigsby pick. So a lot of these guys, I mean, you kind of see a pattern here is they were being, not only did they have less red flags than the guys that were going ahead of them because of age and other circumstances, but they were also being discounted due to questionable workloads. And I think that's something that you want to look to this year, not just with the guys up top, but with a lot of the guys going later. But with the guys going up top, the difference is, like you said, they're all those guys that worked out in the later rounds of the year before. So here's what I will say about the running back position this year. I think we both still stand by it's not going to screw you if you take a shot on a wide receiver in the first round. More often than not, it's not going to screw you.
It's safe.
It's very, very safe. And he is a huge proponent of safety right now in this year's draft. If you want to go upside, that's why sometimes I want to go with a running back here or there every once in a while, not all the time. But let me say this. Breece Hall being a running back 2 in 2024 will not carry the same weight as being a running back 2 in 2023. Because of where he was going at price. So keep that in mind. If you are accounting for the production that these assets had at a respective price one year and it's much higher, multiple rounds higher the following year, make sure you know what the trade-off is there. And it's not just the value. What we say when we mean value is what's the production return that you're getting at their respective price in the draft.
If Breece Hall
it's going to be less this year. It will be less for Breece Hall this year than it was the year before, unless his points per game go up 6 or 7 points.
Now, there is more value in that than sometimes we tend to acknowledge because so much we see guys bust on their value.
Yeah.
And so guys who meet or exceed their expectations in terms of their ADP are actually fairly rare because there's so much parity. Yep. And so it's just at the top of this draft, man, this year I feel so much better because these guys have so many less red flags.
I was going to say, let's kind of walk through these guys in the first 2 rounds and let's try to be nitpicky and just mention some of the red flags that they might have and see if we're more concerned about those red flags this year than we were last year.
All right.
And see if we're more comfortable.
Yeah.
CMC.
I'm not
going to
go there.
Oh, he's going to get injured. There's never been a running back that's been a top running back for 3 straight. It's Christian McCaffrey, dude. Like, okay, if he gets injured and I drafted him, I'll go down with Christian McCaffrey. Right. Cool. I don't feel bad about it. Bijan Robinson. Red flag. It's an unknown coaching regime, and Arthur Smith was worse than that. And that's why he lost his job.
An unknown coaching regime, though, that came out and basically said that they were going to give Bijan as many touches as he possibly could handle. Like, they definitely
also a pro. They actually have like another dimension to their offense, which is like the passing game.
That actually helps. Also a pro, you're getting a Shanahan-style offense in there if he does implement that type of system coming from coaching under Sean McVay.
It's very running back friendly.
So it's super running back friendly and super friendly to workhorse backs as well. Yes. Coming from an offense where you saw him featured last year, Kyren Williams, right? Look how much work they gave Kyren Williams.
Yes.
So I think that's good. Breece Hall, I can see it because, with Breece Hall, if Aaron Rodgers is back and they're a little bit more of a dynamic team, is he going to get that many dump offs? But he got
going to get 100 dump offs.
But he got 94. But what if he gets 70?
Right. He's still going to be a top 6 running back if he gets 70 targets.
If I draft Breece Hall as the running back 2 and he finishes as a top 6 running back, I'm fine with that. Like, his return on investment is still in like this 80th percentile of what you typically get for guys in the first round. Case in point is
the Breece Hall is probably the safest running back investment in the first round, where he's probably not going, not probably, he may not blow your socks off and win you your league, but you're pretty confident that he's not going to screw you either.
And the reason for that is because his floor is so high because of his receiving upside.
Yes.
And that's typically what it comes down to. Jahmyr Gibbs. I think there are some red flags with Jahmyr Gibbs. I think the big one for Jahmyr Gibbs is that last year he finished as the running back 10 and he was pretty productive. How much more run are they going to give him compared to what they're giving David Montgomery? I think that while we freaked out about Jahmyr Gibbs, and we were totally wrong about that last year, I think this year Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have a very similar workload from what you saw from like weeks 8 on last season.
I think this is where the price to return ratio is really going to come back and bite people potentially, is if you take Gibbs in the first round compared to taking him in the 4th last year.
Exactly.
If his opportunity is going to be
And it's
similar.
not to say that he's not going to be a top 10 running back.
Right.
because he probably will.
Right. But again, I'm looking for more than that for a guy that I'm taking in the top 12 picks of my fantasy draft.
I absolutely agree. And I think there are guys below him from a scoring perspective that have more upside.
So
Saquon Barkley being one of them.
What's the red flag there with Jahmyr Gibbs compared to the other guys that are ahead of him? It's opportunity.
Yeah.
Hands down, the red flag is opportunity.
So let's go to Saquon. Saquon is now, he went from being on the Giants to being on the Eagles. That's like
Best
all of the red flags
in the
we've
NFL.
had with Saquon now are gone. And so
he went from a rushing upside quarterback to a rushing upside quarterback that, yes, is going to get some more red zone rushing touchdowns and stuff. But honestly, I don't really care.
I mean, I think for me, it's how much they use Saquon Barkley in the receiving game, and I think you're going to see a fair amount of it. He's a great receiving back.
Yes,
and he has to. I think red flags with Saquon.
Look at what Swift did before the Eagles, as an entire team, just decided to crap the bed for the second half of the season.
Exactly.
He was very
and behind that line
scary.
too. Now losing Kelsey hurts, but at the same time, it's still the Eagles' offensive line.
If anything, losing Kelsey might diminish the tush push. That's my theory.
He's a big part of that.
What does that do? That helps Saquon Barkley in getting more.
So going into a big second contract, they just paid him a lot of money. The team investment is there, and he's on a good team.
Yep.
JT, the first time he's fully healthy in 2 years, really, because last year he was not only doing the contract thing. The big red flag with him last year, even though he wasn't going here, his red flag was that he wasn't even practicing. And this year, not only is he practicing, he's on a big contract, and he's playing alongside Anthony Richardson.
He's not the only dynamic threat in the offense.
And that's huge.
Yes.
Not to mention, the Colts offensive line has been better. They had a down year in 2022, and then 2023 they came back.
They were top 10
and
last year, I believe.
They were improved. I think they were at the 8 to 10 range in terms of offensive lines in the NFL. Yep. That's huge, right? Kyren Williams is a guy that he's being drafted as like the running back 8. He was the running back 2 last year in points per game, and we want to account for injury. But a lot of people are discounting Kyren Williams because of Blake Corum. But Kyren Williams is back on the offense again, where he averaged 21 points per game last year when he played. 21. He had like 18 touchdowns in 13 games or something like that. He was ridiculous.
Yep.
And you're getting him at a significant discount. What are the red flags there? He's still on a Sean McVay offense. You've still got Matt Stafford there, so it's still dynamic. He doesn't have a huge threat to take his carries. Blake Corum's not a huge threat to take his carries. They're not going to look at Kyren Williams going off this year and just be like, yeah, we're going to cut down. We're going to cut down.
They're probably just going to use him as much as they possibly can before.
And how do we know that?
He's expendable.
Because Sean McVay does that.
That's what he does.
That's what he does. Devon Achane, which this is where the red flags start for me.
This to me is interesting that Devon Achane is going over guys like you said, Kyren Williams, like Derrick Henry, like, gosh, I can't even, down the line, Rachaad White. I haven't even gotten to Rachaad White, going behind James Cook, Josh Jacobs, Isaiah Pacheco, Etienne, like all those guys. He was a running back 4 overall last year. He's still going in the 4th round. That's where he's going last year, and he was a top 6 running back, and he was a league winner. To me, this is where once I get towards the end of that 2nd round and start seeing all these running backs that are coming in this range, I'm like, I'm going to wait a couple more rounds and get these guys that like your Rachaad Whites and stuff. But Achane, the red flag with him specifically, again, is going to be pretty similar to Jahmyr Gibbs, honestly, and that is he is efficient with these touches, but how many touches is that going to be in an offense where it's not just 1, 2, it's 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sometimes 5. I mean, no, seriously. You got Achane, you've got Mostert, you've got Jeff Wilson, you've got
a mix of
Ahmed,
Tyreek and Waddle in the backfield.
You've got Jalen Wright. Like you've got 5 guys there.
Yes.
4 guys that got carries last year at one point in time, and 1 guy they just drafted in the 3rd round, 4th round.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean,
yes.
So there's the red flag. But then guys like
but
Travis,
what's the upside and why is he going there?
Because he was the most efficient rookie of all time
because he could score 20 points with 1 touch, and
he was ridiculous. Yes. But you got guys like Travis Etienne, Derrick Henry, and Rachaad White all going past the 4th round.
Rachaad White's ADP is 63 right now.
All of those guys were running back 1s last year. All of them. So you're getting this is now we're down to, I think we've gone through 10 running backs, 9 running backs. We're talking about the 11, 12, 13th running backs now. And they were all running back 1s last year. Not to mention, you haven't even gotten to the tier of Ramondre, just got a huge contract and a new coaching scheme there. You've got Alvin Kamara, who had 100 targets last year. You have James Cook, who was also a high-end running back 2 last year. So
I'm not going to lie, dude. This might still be the range this year potentially, because even though a lot of these guys won't be producing to the level that some of the guys up top may, the return on investment is going to be much higher at their respective
I mean, it easily could be. Most of the time when you're talking about return on investment, this is the range for that.
Right.
But how much better do you feel about that group than you do about McCaffrey, Eckler, Bijan, Saquon, Chubb, Pollard, Henry, and Jacobs last year? This Chubb, Pollard, Henry, Jacobs tier last year sucked. It was awful to draft in.
Yep.
And that tier this year, which is tiers like that's like
it's
5 through
better.
8. 5 through 8 this year is Saquon, JT, Kyron Williams, Devon A. Chin, and then you got Travis Etienne,
you're actually
Henry.
excited about drafting these guys this year because you're very well aware of their upside and how they're going to be utilized compared to the year before. It was just like taking your medicine. Please no.
And the last
I have to take them though.
You do. The last thing here, the NFL is changing, and you've seen it. It's become quite evident as you've seen what's been successful for teams over the last really 2 years.
Yep.
But look at successful teams and see how much they actually run the ball, because we got to this really pass heavy, really air raid offense thing for a minute there with the battles between. I mean, I think back to the. It was the Rams and the Chiefs game where they each scored like 50 points on the primetime game.
This is
like
one of the best games, one of the most entertaining games ever.
But I mean, it was pass, right?
That was like a Goff. That was like a Goff special.
It was to me that was like the peak of that era though. Like because we did have a span there where it was like it was all
That's
passing.
all you did.
And now look at successful teams and look at how much they run the ball. Baltimore was almost in the Super Bowl last year.
But what committee?
Right, first in rushing attempts, and does have a running back in the top 24 picks, and that's Derrick Henry, right? So he's going there this year. Buffalo, 5th in rushing attempts last year. I mean, that's switching coordinators halfway through the season, too. Philly was 6th. Detroit was 7th. San Francisco was 8th. All of these teams up here at the top
they have running backs going in the top 24. Yeah.
I mean, you're talking everybody but Kansas City's up here.
Yep.
But those were the teams this year in the NFL. And every one of those teams has a running back in the top 24 picks except for Buffalo. And Buffalo, honestly, James Cook's a good value when you're talking about drafting him in the 4th, 5th round, right? So, again, more recently, it's become pretty taboo in fantasy to draft a running back in the first 2 rounds. It's really, really taboo to draft 2 running backs in the first 2 rounds. I might just do it this year.
Maybe you want to be bold this year.
I might just do it this year.
Might do it a couple times.
Because the wide receiver 2 plateau is absolutely a thing.
It's legit.
It's real.
No joke.
I mean, you can see it in the production
video
metrics.
on this.
It does need to be a video because there's a wide range of wide receivers averaging between like 15 and 13 points a game. A wide range. And so because of that, it could really plague people if you actually have a bunch of running backs hit their upside this year. If you have these guys that are actually end up being like legit efficient and legit good, and you end up having 4 20-point per game running backs this year, people who drafted wide receiver are going to be pissed about that.
Yep.
And so this is one of those things like where last year it may not have been a good idea to zig when people zagged. This year, I might be zigging a little bit. It's all up to your own opinion, though. So let us know in the comments what you think about this year's running back class. Do us a huge favor. If you play fantasy football, drop a like on this video and subscribe. It really helps us out, really helps us grow this channel. We're trying to grow this content and be able to put out more consistent and high-quality content, and you can support us by doing those 2 things. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you later.